Welcome to Beats on Bytes. My name's Kurt Wilson, and today we're talking about technology and music. Well, here's a little interesting journey. Okay, let's think about it. Jack Mullins is in the Army, World War II. He's in Germany. He is fascinated by the fact that a lot of his working time is late into the night, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, and he's listening to German radio, which are broadcasting full-on orchestras, and they sound beautiful. And he's not used to that, so he's trying to figure out, well, there's no possible way that these orchestras are playing at 2 o'clock in the morning in Germany and broadcasting live, which is the norm. So he's figured out that they have some sort of duplicating device that he wants to look into. So after the war is over, he goes into a German town and finds out where the broadcast station is and finds the tape machine that they're using is very advanced. And so what he does, he buys one, disassembles it because you can't, coming back from Germany, the servicemen were not allowed to ship large items, so he had to break it up into, hundreds of parts, reassemble it once he gets back to America. And at that point, he realized what a phenomenal machine this was, realized how it works, did some improvements. He did a demonstration of what this machine was capable of doing. In the audience were a couple of members from Ampex Tape Corporation who agreed to manufacture this device. They were looking for something to do after the war that could include technology and move it forward, so they were excited about this. So let's jump forward a little bit. Bing Crosby, he was an avid golfer, and one of the things he discovered is that doing live broadcast of his performances was cutting into his golf time. So he got a hold of the Ampex tape company and commissioned them to create a tape machine where he could record his shows to not have to be at the radio station to do his live broadcast. Contractually, he was supposed to do a show every day, and it was cutting into his golf time. So here, Bing Crosby is one of the biggest recording and movie stars of the time, and he's involved in this whole process. So that happens, and everyone's happy. So Bing Crosby, major player in creating the tape machine that revolutionized radio and documenting and archiving radio performances and quote-unquote live performances. Another great thing about that is that tape could be cut, it could be spliced, it could be all those kind of things. No longer did you have to have a continuous performance. You could have a snippet of a performance. You could have an orchestra that went for an hour, and you could slice it to a 15-minute segment, or a 5-minute segment, or a 1-minute segment, and use it as a background for your advertisements. There was a way to actually manipulate the recorded music to then play in different types of formats and in different type of situations. You could even do a best of and take all the best parts of a performance and create a compilation that was impactful and succinct. Through the course of this, Bing Crosby has a couple of these machines that he drops off to his friend Les Paul, because Les Paul is in the process of doing a lot of, he's figuring out how to do sound-on-sound recording, but what he's doing it on is acetates. So these are the grooved acetate recordings. They're like lacquers, they're like discs, they're like records, but they're more volatile. They don't last as long. And what he was doing was he was recording a track on an acetate, playing that back on one machine, and recording that plus what he's playing live onto the next acetate recording machine, and he was calling this sound on sound. And what he did, he would use up to 500 of these discs, recording all of the different guitar parts. His wife, Mary Ford, would be doing all the different vocal parts, and they developed something that was so unique and so different, and it had never been done before. And people were trying to figure out, how's he doing this? Because he's playing 8 guitar parts on this recording, and sometimes he would slow the acetate down so he could play a part slowly, speed it up, it becomes higher pitched and faster, And so he was doing all these kind of things that were not done at the time. He was truly an innovator. He developed slap echo. He developed phasing. There were so many things that guitarists and recording techniques that are using from the 60s on and current that Les Paul developed back in I think it was like 1945, 1946, something like that. So Bing Crosby, Jack Mullins, Les Paul, and all of a sudden we have sound-on-sound recording, and Bing Crosby gives Les Paul one of the Ampex 200A tape machines. It's a mono machine, and immediately Les Paul starts working with this tape machine. He put another recording head and created the very first multi-track recording tape machine. This is the beginning of everything. Because now you've got a song where you are playing along to that song and recording another track on top of that song on one piece of tape. This is monumental. This is earth-shattering. This is the beginning of the future. And so what he was able to do is to create this machine, and eventually an 8-track machine. So he has 8 tracks all going simultaneously, and he can record on individual tracks. This is the beginning of modern recording techniques. Now we have computers where you've got unlimited tracks. You could have unlimited. Unlimited is a number that's really big. Phil Spector's Wall of Sound owes a great deal of credit to the sound-on-sound thing, as well as the Beach Boys, Brian Wilson, and the Beatles. This was such a leap of allowing the recording process to be part of the creative process, as opposed to just documenting and capturing something that is performed live or at the same time, and creating something that could then be embellished and added to. This changed the way people wrote, listened, and enjoyed music forever. So Les Paul is one of the few people that have a permanent exhibit in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, as well as the Inventors Hall of Fame, because of all the innovations. Phenomenal. So when you're doing multi-track recording, multi-track recording means that you've got more than one track. Back in the day, you would record a live recording, like let's say Bing Crosby, that might be onto one track of tape. You've got one tape. So, and on that track, you've got all of the instruments, all the vocals, all the everything on that one track. And that's performance, live, bam, it's on the tape, it's done. With multi-track recording, let's say 4 tracks. You've got 4 tracks, so now you can have all of your instrumentation on one. You could have a second, a background vocal on another, and the third you might have the lead vocal, and maybe you have the solo that happens with a solo guitar with the strings or something like that. And those individual tracks can then be manipulated or mixed to where if you want the instrumentations down a little bit, the vocal up a little bit, you have control over that because they're on individual tracks. They're not combined, they're not joined, they can be processed individually. You could add reverb to the vocal. You could add a delay to the guitar, and it wouldn't affect all of the other instruments. Now, Sgt. Pepper's was done on a 4-track recording machine. 4 tracks. Think of that record. Think of all of the things that are on that record, as far as the overdubs, the tape loops, the brilliance that George Martin and the Beatles put together, and Jeff Emmerich, the engineer, was very instrumental in all those kind of things. In fact, read his book if you get a chance. Jeff Emmerich. Fascinating as far as just recording techniques, what the Beatles did. I digress. To think that an album like Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band was done by the Beatles on a 4-track tape machine is astounding when you think of the audio quality and all of the things that they did on that. How they did that. They would record 3 tracks and bounce those down, combine those to another track. So now they've got 1 track is the combined track, and now they have 3 more tracks they can do more things to. They can record other things to. That'll still be in sync and still be in the same song. And so they could do 2 more and then bounce those down to another track. So now you've got 5 tracks onto 1 track. The challenge with that is every time you bounce down, you're losing some sonic quality. You might be adding some tape hiss, you might be losing some of the highs and lows, and you are definitely losing any sort of individual ability that you could have to manipulate that sound later, as far as individual EQ, reverbs, delays, any of those kind of things. Arguably, the best analog recording device that was built would be the 16-track 2-inch tape machine. Why that is because you have 2 inches of magnetic tape and 16 individual tracks on that tape. So just from a real estate viewpoint, you've got the widest heads to tape ratio better than a 24-track 2-inch tape situation, because now you've crammed 8 more tracks onto the 2 inches. Now, the most common and most used was the 24-track on 2 inches of tape. And often people would, if for a big project, they might link 2 24-track machines together, meaning they wired them up so that when you hit one button, both machines started at the same time, so that all 48 tracks would be in sync through the recording and mixing process. But the reality was you still have 24 tracks on 2 inches of tape. And many of the greatest albums through the rock and roll era were done on that format. So now, with everybody using hundreds of digital tracks, individual tracks that are sonically pristine and virtually no tape hiss or any noise, if you bounced, you wouldn't be losing anything except for the ability to individually process those tracks. It's amazing what can be done or what has been done. Think about the things that have been achieved in those eras before technology has allowed all of the multitude of choices you have now. It's phenomenal. So what Les Paul did was he did sound on sound recording, meaning you could lay down that first track, maybe it was a rhythm track, maybe it was a rhythm guitar, something like that, and then you could play on top of that and mix the song all together down to a stereo mix or a mono mix. Back in the day, everything was mono because people didn't have stereo speakers or stereo receivers that could even play something that had 2 distinct left and right sides. We get spoiled with what we have now, not realizing what it was then. And if you listen to the original mono mixes of the Beatles records, per se, they are different. They are different. They have a different feel. They have a different sound to them. There was more attention and time put to the singles back then in mono than the stereo releases, because again, stereo releases were more of a novelty. It wasn't really what everybody listened to, wasn't what everybody had. FM radio started to broadcast stereo, which became quite a big deal. But before that, you had AM radio, which was a shorter frequency width, and mono was the only thing that was projected. That was the only thing that was transmitted. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe, and make sure you hit the notification bell so I can let you know when I've got more content coming up. And thanks so much for being here. Beats on Bytes, Kurt Wilson. Look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks so much.